Please be seated. Members, we now turn our attention to the appropriations to the Premier on behalf of the Office of the Police Commissioner, found on page 11 of your document. We now consider OCP 1, Crime Prevention and Protection Services, $22,542,164 in 2020 and $22,789,139 in 2021. Are there any questions? Member for Boddentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Honorable Premier, can the Premier tells us exactly how many police we have employed, how many officers we have employed at this time within the RCIPS? And secondly, what's the breakup between what was historically police versus now what's going to be the Joint Marine Unit? I think they have combined those two.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for the question. I think it's probably more efficient if I simply introduce the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Derek Byrne, and ask him to respond to the questions.
Welcome to the committee, sir. If you would, Chase, state your name and your position for the record.
Sorry. Good afternoon, Chairman. Derek Byrne, Commissioner of Police, Royal Cayman Islands Police Service.
Thank you, Commissioner, for coming. Through the Chairman to the witness, to the Commissioner of Police, just looking for a breakdown in terms of current officers that we have enrolled now in what was traditionally the RCIPS, and now, plus I understand they have now added, I think, the Joint Marine Unit or the Marine Unit section. And what's the breakdown in terms of the two units?
Thank you, Chairman. The current total staffing for RCIPS is 486. 50 of those persons are administrative support, with 436 being officers and members of the Joint Marine Unit, and all the other specialist services, which include our scenes of crime and all air operations unit. So there are 11 people altogether in the Joint Marine Unit at the moment as part of RCIPS. And you'll be aware, Chairman, that the Joint Marine Unit will transition into the Coast Guard early January 2020.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Through the Chairman, roughly between 2019, between last year and this year, roughly how many officers have left the police force already?
I have lost 36 personnel through attrition in 2019 and 34 in 2018.
Thank you very much. And how many of those, of the 60 that you lost, how many were Caymanian?
I would have to maybe look at that just a little bit more in depth. It may take me a few minutes to get that information. 2019, it may take me a moment to gather that information.
That's fine, we have time,
Yeah,
that's fine,
yeah.
that's fine.
17 Caymanian nationals left the police service in 2019, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Commissioner, can you repeat the answer, please? Sorry.
The number of Caymanian persons leaving the police service during 2019 is 17, Chairman.
And do you perchance have the number for 2018 also?
I'm sorry, Chairman, not just to hand. I think I could get it before we leave. I just don't have it to hand, Chairman.
That's fine. Thank you very much. In terms of looking in terms of the attrition, as you term it, in terms of what is it? I know I'm aware that you guys had a recruitment fair last, I think, weekend. I'm just curious in terms of, in addition to that recruitment fair, what exactly is it that the RCIPS is actually doing to try to recruit more Caymanians within the police force?
Thank you, Chairman. So during 2019, we recruited 75 persons into RCIPS, the majority being Caymanian nationals. The same process is being adopted for 2020, and we've had our latest recruitment fair last Saturday morning. The focus is on recruiting Caymanians to the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, and we would hope to have 2 classes of 25 during the year 2020.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Through you, Mr. Chairman, one of the things in terms of building, I guess, a solid police force is to be able to attract and retain. And one of the things that it appears, looking at the numbers and also looking at the stats that were provided in the annual HR report 2018 that was prepared by the portfolio of the Civil Service, it appears as if, though, that there is a challenge in terms of not just attracting but also retaining Caymanian police officers. And I'm just curious in terms of one of the things that actually allows us to retain officers or attract and retain officers is promotion, but we understand how many promotions board have we had since you have become police commissioner?
The Chairman, none have taken place since I've become the commissioner in late 2016, November 2016.
Thank you very much. Well, out of curiosity, through you, Mr. Chairman, how many officers roughly do we have, ballpark, that is now in acting positions at this point?
I have 6 inspectors, 3 acting chief inspectors, and I have 11 sergeants, acting sergeant.
And out of curiosity, how long have they been acting in those roles?
Some have been acting well in excess of 12 months, and some acting 18 months, and some a bit more.
Is true, Mr. Chairman, is the Commissioner aware that the personnel regulations that they're trying to get centralized actually has, I think, something dealing with officers once they're acting for more than 12 months in terms of either A, being confirmed to that role, or basically they need to be confirmed or something needs to happen to them, but they just can't be acting in excess for more than 12 months.
With your permission, Chairman, just to explain that, I operate the temporary, I call it strategic allocation of personnel for the time being under Section 6 of the police law, as opposed to the Public Service Management Law or the personnel regulations. So the promotions and appointments are under a different section, I would respectfully submit. I am very much aware of that debate taking place in the RCIPS. I am addressing it, but the overarching strategic issue for me is to establish a permanent establishment redistribution model for the police service, which is not in place. And the objective there is to define what the police service should look like, the numbers and the ranks ratio. And at the moment, our ranks ratio is all wrong. It's ineffective, it's inefficient. I'm working hard with my Chief Human Resource Manager and the Human Resource Department to put in place what we're calling a PERM, which is the Permanent Establishment Distribution Model, which will guide our future strategic direction for setting our rank structure and our ratios.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for that, and I really do appreciate that. When do you expect that strategic policy will be completed?
I've just reported recently that it will be late 2020, early 2021, when we have a fully costed business plan for the police service, which will be similar to an activity-based costing plan. We will be able to define what the police service should look like, where our shortages are, if there are shortages, and where our people should be employed, and that I'm making best use of the resources that I have and the money that's provided by central government.
And just out of curiosity, is there a committee that's looking at this, or how is this strategy, how is this being developed?
Well, it's been developed. I have had a report commissioned by HR back in early 2018, which gave me some guidance. I then chair a small group with my chief human resource manager and my financial controller at the moment. We are the small team that are looking at it, and then we have some conversations that take place at the senior leadership team level to discuss the direction we're taking and what's required for that future direction.
Thank you very much. In terms of going back to the acting officers that you have, are all the officers that you have acting in the different positions? So, for example, I think you said you had 6 that were, was it inspectors or chief inspectors that were acting?
6 inspectors and 3 chief inspectors.
Okay, and are all of those that are acting in those roles, have they all passed the exams to be acting in those positions?
The exact position is all but one of the inspectors has passed the exam, but the inspector that has not passed the exam has advanced leadership diploma and leadership capabilities funded by Cayman Islands government, and we're using that training to deliver the services in the district that he's stationed in.
And also curiosity, all the inspectors that are acting, have they all, well, as the one that is that's not has passed the exam, has he passed the sergeant exam?
Yes, he is a sergeant in an acting position as inspector, but he has not passed the inspector's promotion examination.
But he has passed the sergeant exam?
Yes, absolutely.
Member for West Bay North.
Mr. Chairman, through you. How many Caymanians did you say you recruited in this past sitting?
We recruited a total of 75 Caymanians during the year 2019.
Okay.
A
Through
total
you,
of 75. Not all police officers. Some were in administrative secretary roles and other support
through you,
roles,
Mr. Chairman. Let's say one of those people, or some of those that you recruited or that were accepted, had a major degree, but in the interviews and stuff, they were a little rough. Do you all take that into consideration and say, well, okay, this lady has gone to university, done this, and got awarded and passed all things? Do you have anything in place that would take that individual and shape them and say, well, yes, you've done this, but you know your interview never went well, but you still have these and you're a Caymanian? What's the situation when you do things like that?
Mr. Chairman, I can speak for 2019 specifically. Some persons did not make the first round interview, and working with our Deputy Governor and POX, we agreed to do a second interview for those persons to give a second opportunity, and some of those persons did come through on the second opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, last one. So you're saying that a young individual with a bachelor's degree in criminology and a master's degree in counterterrorism, Caymanian born and bred, had no place in the police force? Because I've seen the papers, and when I heard about it, I went to them, they said, look, leave it alone. I said, I would like to see it, because in the future, because I was one of the people who told this young man, study counterterrorism with all the cruise ships and various stuff we have here. You never know what you would need. And now to be told this, I figured there must be some place or something you could do to use a Caymanian with a bachelor's degree in criminology and a master's in counterterrorism, and they can't get a job. I think in his own country something must be wrong.
Mr. Chairman, the best I can say there is I'm almost certain I know the case we're talking about. I did look at it on more than one occasion. I did have representations made, and there were other skills that were absolutely absent from the interview process. But advice was given to that young person to have a look at it again and not to be dissuaded from coming again for interview.
Hence my question, Mr. Chairman, what do they do for people like this? Thank you.
Georgetown Central, do you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, good evening, Commissioner. First, I want to start off by saying congratulations to you and your department and many of the police officers who are there who've been doing such a great job to reduce the crime. It's been recognized by many people, particularly with burglaries and the like. So congratulations to you and your team. In respect to the description of crime prevention and protection services, it talks about crime prevention initiatives. Can you give me some examples of those crime prevention initiatives that we're talking about?
They effectively relate to, I suppose, patrols, proactive patrols, intelligence-led patrols, where we pick up information. A very basic one is weekend activities, wherever they might be on the island. If we hear of any activities that are taking place, Chairman, resources are allocated over the weekend, additional resources. Burglary patrols, where we find out through our crime trend analysis that burglary is a problem. We put covert resources in place in unmarked cars. It's that type of activity. The helicopter would be deployed to assist us. Basically, it's an intelligence-led approach when we can find out where we should be putting our resources best. It's a targeted way of allocating our resources rather than aimless policing.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, would you agree that these crime prevention strategies are strategies of a person who's of the mindset with the intent to commit a crime, but these strategies are trying to stop the person who intended to commit a crime from doing that crime?
Chairman, I'm not sure if I actually got the question right, but if we look at gangs and the work that's being done by government, chaired by Deputy Governor, multi-agency, right across the civil service, we would see the efforts that are being made to dissuade youth from engaging in any antisocial activities or crimes. That's a kind of a picture of government addressing the situation, and the police are a component part, a very critical component part of dealing with youth, the next generation. I think that's one example in operation across the whole of government, which includes the police service.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm glad you clarified that, because I was getting to my next question around this subject matter. The former police commissioner had a quote that said, "It's the police's job to intervene when a crime is committed or to prevent a crime from happening." And he followed up that quote to say, "It's the government's job to stop people from wanting to commit a crime." Would that be a fair assessment of the police's role in respect to crime?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sure there's some truth to that, and it sounds pretty simple insofar as there's so many constituent parts here. Certainly it's the function of police to provide a safe environment, and there's a lot more to it than just prevention and detection. We've got to engage, we've got to try and educate, we've got to try and engineer the youth away from crime and the person that commit the crime. But generally there are a lot of agencies, or a large number of agencies across government, that are working to prevent people committing crime. That goes to prison rehabilitation, probation services, ourselves as police officers. So I think the statement has, I'm sure, huge validity, but I think that the concept and the whole approach is much, much wider.
Thank you. Moving on to another subject matter, I see that, and through you, Mr. Chair, I see that you have some new vehicles. So congratulations for getting those necessary tools to fight crime. But I have a concern, which is to do with and forgive me for my lack of description, but the alarming sound that each one of the vehicles have. As a traveler, I've noticed that in their different jurisdictions, they have a specific sound to police. Like in the UK, you hear the police car, it sounds different than it sounds in the United States. And what I experienced just recently in the transport of a prisoner back to prison was two different sounds going at the same time. So there was no true recognition of which sound is the police sound. Do you have more than one police recognized sound going on in respect to the new vehicles?
I think I can answer that generally, Chairman. These are advanced police vehicles, and they carry what would be regarded as the normal siren but also what's called a sonic siren, which is a rumbler. And that is to give a greater sense of urgency and a greater sense of awareness to the road users who may not necessarily hear the ordinary siren, which would be available on the remainder of our vehicles. So the only vehicles at the moment, Chairman, carrying the rumbler are the 4 new firearms response vehicles.
Understood. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would only just give a little bit of advice before I move on to the other one. It does come off, particularly when both of them are in line with each other or behind each other, a rather confusing combination where I'm not sure what is happening, whether it's ambulance, police, or what have you, because normally people have come accustomed to a particular sound, but with the 2 different versions, it becomes problematic. But anyway, I'm quite sure you will note that fact. Moving on now to the helicopters. Some constituents have expressed their concerns, and I've seen it now myself, whereby there's a perception that the helicopters are used in circumstances when it doesn't seem practical, which obviously adds an added cost. And for example, I've heard someone speak to me today about the helicopter hovering over the accident this morning and question whether is there a necessary use for the helicopter this morning, and how long does it need to be there for, particularly for a traffic offense or a traffic accident. What is the policy on that? Because it does seem like sometimes it's just up in the air, just for up in the air purposes. Is that an unfair statement?
I think, Chairman, the best way of answering this is we're funded by government to fly between 400 and 600 hours per annum, depending on whether we have 1 or 2 helicopters. For my part, as part of my strategic plan, I like to have the helicopter up by 7 o'clock every morning to clear the island, to let us know from air to ground that there's nothing particular that's going to cause us any difficulty. With the current traffic difficulties that we have in the island that I think everybody is aware of, the helicopter provides a very valuable eye in the sky, or an air-to-ground directional control of where we should have our resources. We find it hugely beneficial. This morning, in this unfortunate case of the fatal accident, it was there guiding us, telling us there were major delays in certain areas and we needed to open a lane to move traffic eastbound, get them up back into Georgetown quickly. So it provides very valuable real-time information. And for the most part, then, we try to use it on an intelligence-led deployment. That's our approach, but I do like to have the helicopter up every morning by 7, giving us an air-to-ground status report on what's going on the island or anything that requires our attention.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just going to have one more question, and I have some other questions, but it'll go down in some other line item areas. In respect to the helicopter, we know that the border control now has been established, and I'm excited about the proper protections from our borders that will offer. Will those helicopters also be assisting them, or will they have access to them in their efforts to tighten our borders?
I can answer that by saying unrestricted access, immediate and real-time access. Boat unit operates under the direction and control of the Commissioner of Police. It will be seamless interaction. That is the strategic direction.
Member for Savannah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll say to the Commissioner, specifically traffic department has had a rough time the last 15 to 20 hours. It was quite a show of force, and I certainly can understand the usage of the helicopter in trying to assist there. My usual spiel to you as I spoke on the budget: speeding. Speeding kills, and we've seen it on 3 occasions actually, including the one in Kentura. I understand is gravely ill. Mr. Chairman, through you to the Commissioner, as I've said to the Lady Minister of Financial Services, whatever it takes this Legislative Assembly to put in place radar enforced with cameras, especially, sir, at these schools. We have survived some serious problems, and lo and behold, whatever happened last night and this morning, I'm almost certain it had something to do with speeding. Your guys cannot be on all of these roads. There is no way in this world that we can keep up with this, and I'm begging and pleading to everyone in here to understand, especially these schools that are close to the road, sir. I know recently the new head in Borden Town has been deploying the police down at Savannah, Clifton Hunter, Borden Town, and I'm sure spreading themselves throughout the districts. Sir, I'm asking you and the Lady Minister, Ms. Bush, to deal, Ms. Rivers, to deal with this, because it is scary. I frequently stop at the Savannah School, and there's 2 lines of traffic going down, coming down, especially between 7:30 and 8:30, and then 2 till about 3:30 when I think it stops. The police go there, they park with their lights on. Sir, it's time to stop that nonsense. They get there with that radar gun till we can get the radar in place and catch these people. The only thing we Caymanians understand, sir, is when they have to pay something. And I understand it's twice the penalty if you're caught speeding in that. So, sir, I'm encouraging you and begging and pleading with this legislative assembly that urgently we vote funds to secure this, to save. It's simple. I know the Minister of Works is trying his best, but it boils down to one simple thing. We have too many cars, too many vehicles, these gigantic trucks that pass parking. Even coming down this morning when I was going north side, which I do 5 days a week, I mean, the day that one of them runs off and hits someone else, you hear about demolishment. Years gone by, it used to be a limitation, especially on those big vehicles. It's up to what happened with limiting their speed. But my goodness, the day that they hits on someone, it is slow walking and low singing, and that's when you're going to the grave. Last thing I would say, sir, as I notice back to the lights, I see they got this thing now, day and night, with the little blue lights. Please make them take that off. Because once the person that is speeding and doing whatever he's doing, see them lights, they're going to behave. Take it off, catch these people and lock them up. I know we're trying to get ready for another bigger prison in Northward or whatever. If they don't understand it, that is the only language some people will understand. We have to do something. I beg you, sir, and I've known you for quite a long time, been able to communicate with you. And please listen to me and this legislative assembly. It's our children and our future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Member for East End.
Mr. Chair, I just got one quick question, if that's possible, before the member. Thank you. For the Commissioner, through you, Mr. Chair, I want to ask about a very sensitive topic without giving any details. The witness protection services, our options. As you are aware, I was quite concerned that there are people who are not fulfillments are not being kept when a person who is offered themselves up to be a witness for a serious crime. Can you, without giving sensitive details, can you explain how that works? Because if there's not credibility with that option, then it creates problems for persons who want to step forward to give evidence in respect to crime.
Chairman, I'm pretty restricted in what I can say, other than it is extremely well controlled, managed effectively by the Director of Public Prosecutions and a counsel assigned to the Director of Public Prosecutions. And when a case comes to our notice, there's a full case conference and there's strict criteria to be applied. And if a person meets that criteria, then we can proceed with the program. And I think anything outside of that would be too sensitive or inappropriate, Mr. Chairman.
Member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the Commissioner, but my good friend from Savannah saw the stole my thunder and knocked me out of it, but he's always welcome to
That
do
means there are
that.
no questions, and we can put
No,
it to the
no,
vote.
there is one still then.
Okay.
But I want to talk about that those cameras for a second. Just that I understand, Commissioner, that we need legislation for these ticketable offenses. However, the provision in the police law gives you the authority to do some things as well. I don't know if that is sufficient, but we need to move forward with these readable, license plate readable cameras. And I question 911, I think they're the ones responsible for the security. And my question to them was if the platform was available, if sufficient platform was available on their system to accommodate a system of that nature. And they said that it is expandable. So there's no excuse, we can do it now because we really need to curb people's behavior. And of course, maybe I'm too conservative, but you know, I believe that we should have it at $500 and double in school zones. And yes, everybody's going to say that I'm a warmonger and all kinds of stuff. That's fine. But when you pick up $1,000, $2,000 tickets in 1 month, you'll reconsider whether you even drive again. But that's what needs to happen. And you know, $500 may be too high, but 250 right now is 100 double, which is 200. 250 double, you pick up a couple of them a week. You'll leave home earlier the next time. My question is, why is it that, Commissioner, your police officers on patrol are not recognizing the offenses that are being committed, small offenses, and they're waiting for traffic department to do it? Evidently, that's what is happening. I thought a policeman was a policeman, a policeman was a policeman. That if you see an offense, I mean, we all drive the roads and wrong color lights, the tint on the car, the back, the tail lights are out, the license plate is not on. These are basic, what was it Juliana wrote about, the broken windows, turns into something more. And nobody has any respect for the rule of law. They overtaken on the shoulder. I drove behind a police car vehicle the other night by Lion Center, and police car right alongside me, and then they followed it past. Jose is down on the highway, and I turned by Jose, and it wasn't any lights on, not even headlights, but it wasn't a traffic car, and I guess they don't see it. I think somehow we need to impress upon them that they're doing police work. And I know they're busy and they're probably rushing from one place to the next to gather evidence or something, but it is really unfortunate that because an offense is being committed on the road, it needs a traffic car to come to it. Yeah, we need to impress upon them somehow. Maybe it's because of the lack of ticketable offenses for everything. So maybe that's what we need to do. Let's see if you can maybe make some recommendations on regulations or amendment to the law.
Mr. Go ahead.
Member for Bordentown East.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first want to say condolences to both families that lost their families last night and this morning in Borden Town. And I want to also commend the commissioner on the work he has done since starting many years ago. It's especially reintroducing the traffic department. I think this is where we went wrong. And we dropped the ball there. I'm glad that it started to feel like we have a police again. And many people are commending the department. And I want to thank you for all the work that you do in terms of helping us with trying to help the NRA department with efficiency in terms of traffic flow. But we have a major problem where persons when they turn inside going down on Condor Road, when they turn left and go down to Borden Town School, because the speed bumps, the traffic common measure is there, they tend to drive on the right side of the road. And that is where it's nearest to the children, nearest to the school. And I've had to slow down and stop in most cases. I live on that road. I can also tell you that that's a very dangerous situation, and something is going to happen there soon, Commissioner. Also, the Anton Borden Road. We heard what happened last night. Speeding 75, 80 miles an hour. It is ridiculous what goes on Anton Borden. It's a speedway, Commissioner. It's an area where I live in. I can tell you that I've on 2 occasions tried to turn right on my road, and a car was overtaking me while I was turning right and had to run into the bush in my road twice. Even a Domino's Pizza car, right? So not only me, but my wife also experienced the same thing. Someone's going to get killed on that road. And me and my wife now have intentionally, we indicate almost 4 light poles down so that we don't have that same situation again. But the speeding on Anton Borden, I don't know what kind of traffic common measures we need to put on that road, Commissioner, but it is, well, we saw what happened last night, so we don't need to say something's going to happen soon. Something has happened. But anything that you can do to assist, intervene in this area, Commissioner, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Just a general comment, Chairman, to provide some reassurance. I take all the issues raised by the members on board, and we'll look at them. But just to give some reassurance that our traffic department has grown to 1 inspector, 2 sergeants, including 1 that's acting, and 14 constables. And as we mentioned, the lights that are permanently static on the car, we are funded for 2 new unmarked cars which arrive on island next week or the week after, and we will have covert intercept available for speed detection to augment our uniform patrols. So I think that's a development, and I will certainly take note of the issues that have been raised by the members this afternoon, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Member for West Bay West.
Mr. Chairman, I want to place on record my thanks to the Commissioner for the establishment of the community, the police beat officers. I work closely with Mr. Miles and Mr. Sergeant Ling, but you also have PC Smith and PCE Banks and AC Grant that work, and they're helping really to safeguard our community. You see them around, you call them, they come, and I want to also put on record my appreciation for the establishment of the community service officers. That, I think, these initiatives are important, and I think that they are going to make a lot of difference. Thank God not all our areas are rough, and by and large we've seen some reductions in the burglaries, etc. And I think it's the work of the police that has brought some of this to a closure. Let's put it that way, I hope. But I certainly want to thank the Commissioner for the establishment of those initiatives. I can only say that the officers are diligent in what they do. They pay attention to the community. So thank you very much, sir.
Member for Northside.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I also want to thank the Chief of Police for the new vehicles for Northside. But I have one question, sir. The new SUV is equipped with radar detection.
Yes, Chairman, on board built-in radar speed detection equipment.
Is there any particular reason why it's not deployed? I haven't seen it. I mean, you know the problem we have on Sundays and Saturdays with Rum Point, but I never seem to see it.
It should be deployed, Mr. Chairman, and it's another issue we'll take on board to make sure that it's dealt with.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, what is the process to get yellow lines on street to prevent parking?
The process in the ordinary course, Chairman, is it can be raised by a number of parties, but from a policing perspective, we go to the traffic management panel and agree it then with National Roads Authority, and once it's agreed that it should go in, then the National Roads Authority arrange for the lines to be placed at a particular location.
I think it was 5 years ago, or not here, me and the member for East End met with that trafficking committee about and one of the things that I requested for them to consider was yellow lines in the Rum Point, particularly on the Sandpoint Road. Every Sunday we have a dangerous situation there where people are parking on both sides of the road, and if you need to get ambulance or anything in, it's impossible. So we need to get something. There was a period of time when the police would go down there and deploy cones, no parking cones, but it's been probably a year that hasn't happened, and it's a very dangerous situation. People, you know. The other question is, sir, as I understand it, the training program for, or at least the initial training program for Caymanians wishing to join the police force is a 3-month course at Governor Square?
It's 17 weeks, Chairman, for training. That's the initial training, and then you continue your probation period for up to 2 years.
What is the career path for people beyond that initial training once they complete their probation? Do we then send them overseas for specialized training or any kind of longer general police training?
Generally, Mr. Chairman, we bring in specialists from other police services and train within our training and development unit, and on occasion selected officers are sent overseas for leadership and expert training in particular skills that require a technical expertise. For instance, next week 2 officers will travel to Kingston to undergo CBRN training with Interpol in Jamaica. We avail of any opportunities presented by our neighbouring police services, either in the United States, the United Kingdom, Jamaica, or wherever it would come. But more often than not, we bring in the experts and train larger numbers here on island.
But does not deprive the Caymanians of that experience of being able to connect with people from other countries and get the rounded situation of being more in a college or university type training, so they may, one, benefit more from it, but also place a greater value on it when we do it locally?
I would agree, Chairman, that there are benefits. During the year, we did send 4 officers to a leadership development program, 4 junior officers to Canada, and they came back, and there may be further training into the future. We look at what's available, we look at our budgets, we see what the advantages are, Chairman, and then we allocate our resources.
But there are police training schools in the UK and stuff like that is for a couple of years and stuff where people could go and get general training and specialized training.
I could put it this way, that I met representatives from Canada last week and also the American ambassador to Jamaica and asked them for training opportunities. and they will explore that with us. They've gone back then to look at what opportunities would be available at the various ranks to the RCIPS to internationalise us.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, is it a matter of resources why the helicopter is only intended to fly about 1.5 hours per day?
Well, as it is at the moment, Chairman, we have 3 helicopters. We're available to fly a lot more than 1.5 hours per day. And yesterday we flew, I think it was just under 6 hours, early mid-afternoon and then late into the evening. It varies from day to day, and we do have end-of-year leave that's occurring at the minute, and we will have the second helicopter arriving next week, so we'll see helicopters flying more hours. But we're funded now for between 400 and 600 hours when we have both helicopters on island.
Is there any recruitment effort ongoing to get other Caymanians qualified to fly the helicopter in the future?
There's nothing specific at the minute. We are full for pilots with our 3 pilots, which is our allocation at the minute. For tactical flight officers, we did invite applications last year. We have 1 Caymanian officer to come into us on that, and you'll be aware that we have 1 Caymanian officer auxiliary constable away in Trinidad training, which is actually under review at the moment for 2020. But one of our officers went to train as a helicopter pilot in Trinidad last April, late March, early April. And we're just reviewing that at the moment to see what the next steps are for 2020.
Can you give us a broad breakdown of what the Caymanian is doing in Trinidad? How many hours he's flying, what kind of flying he's doing, what kind of equipment he's flying?
He's not flying the H-145, which is our difficulty. As it turns out over the last year, because of some contractual difficulties that National Helicopters, who are the service provider to us in Trinidad, have been having apparently some contractual issues, which is forcing us, so he has only performed 40.5 hours flight time outside of training hours on the helicopter. They are having their own difficulties, and we are looking at options for 2020 here on island, Mr. Chairman.
And how long has he been there to get that 40 hours?
He departed late March, early April of this year, Chairman.
Because if I recall, the Deputy Governor said that his training was expected to take 3 years, which I thought was an awful long time.
To explain some of that, Chairman, the requirement for a captain, which is a fully qualified pilot, is 3,000 hours as part of our insurance requirement and our air operations certificate granted by the Civil Aviation Authority here in the Cayman Islands. When this proposition was first put to me in 2017, we had a single pilot helicopter, an EC-135. You'll be aware that earlier in the year that was decommissioned following an accident. We now have a twin pilot helicopter, the H-145, with a second helicopter about to arrive. That provides us with much greater scope and capacity and capability to look at training subject to advice from the Civil Aviation Authority and our insurance back here on island, which is something we're looking at immediately for 2020.
Would you agree, sir, that the insurance requirement is what the government has negotiated? In other words, you could get pilots on for less hours, but it would cost a little more money?
Chairman, Part A and Part B. The first part is to get the person trained as a first pilot, and then to come back to be a captain, it would be 3,000 hours. So certainly could fly in a twin helicopter as a first pilot rather than a captain with less than 3,000 hours. And the plan would be in a particular case to do a 3-week H-145 qualification course, Chairman, in the States, United States, and come back here and fly under the direction and leadership and training of our existing 3 pilots who are qualified to train on the H-145.
The new helicopter, is it a glass instrument? In other words, fully digital, or is it analog?
It has advanced avionics and a twin control, so it's the most up-to-date equipment we could have in avionics as it stands at this time.
And the Caymanian who is in Trinidad is in fact certified on a glass cockpit?
He's certified, but not in the H145 model, which is our model, Chairman.
And you said that specific type rating is a 3-week course?
We can arrange, as I understand from some preliminary work I have done, that he can undergo a 2-week course in the United States, familiarization, ground handling, and separately a 3-week pass-fail course to qualify basic as a H145 helicopter first pilot.
So, in other words, if we recruited a young Caymanian today who was willing to go and train to be a helicopter pilot, he got his FAA qualifications as a fully qualified helicopter pilot, instrument rated, the whole works. He would then be allowed to come back to Cayman. We would send him off for the type rating, I think is a lingo they use in the industry, and then he could come back and fly as first officer on one of our helicopters. Or would he still need 3,000 hours?
No, Chairman, so my understanding and the work I've done is that person could fly as a first officer accompanied by a captain, and until the hours are built up, which currently stand at 3,000 hours for captain.
Member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I first want to thank the Commissioner for the work he's done in the community with the community policing. It is making a big difference. And I really want to thank him for the additional resources as well. I understand some of them are still coming in line for the Eastern Districts, but I'm seeing a much higher police presence on the roads and so on. So there is some improvement there. I do have a question though, and I'll be very honest and say that, I've had some representations made to me that there have been changes in the shifts recently with police officers that have created some concerns for some officers. I wonder if the Commissioner could explain to us what those changes were, so that we could all have a better understanding.
I'm not so sure, Chairman, that the changes have actually taken place. There was a proposal to change shifts. I received numerous representations, some fair and some not so fair, and we have deferred that shift pattern change, and the idea was to give us greater coverage over an extended period of time to eliminate a crossover period that occurs 8 hours during the day. That's it in its simplest form, but the shift pattern change did not actually take place. It was mooted. I had submitted a plan and I received representations and have not advanced it at the moment.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to the Commissioner. And I don't know anything about policing, so I'm not going to get into critiquing anything that you do, other than to raise concerns when they brought it to me. But there was another concern raised. What I needed to know is, what is your policy with regard to officers having second jobs or their own business? How is permission granted? What is the process they go through to be able to do that?
Chairman, the provisions under PSM law say that they can apply, officers can apply, and indeed civilian personnel in RCIPS can apply to the Commissioner of Police. What I'm dealing with, and in very large numbers, are renewals that have been going on for many years. It covers a range of private services operated by police officers, and it is very, very frequent. And effectively, the process is you apply, it's reviewed by your sergeant, your inspector, and a recommendation is made to me. And I have to say I haven't received a recommendation yet from a supervisor declining the application of the officer. And it's more a formality for me, with the exception of one case of security, private security, that I rejected on the basis that I considered was a conflict.
Thank you. So just to clarify, from my understanding, then there's a hierarchy, and you're at the very top of that. So no approval is given without the sort of supervisory officers below you also giving their approval.
I insist, and basically what's on the application is that it doesn't interfere with their primary role as police officers. I look at the number of hours that are going to be availed of by this particular person, and they are extremely frequent.
Member for Bontown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the Commissioner of Police. One of the things I've always believed is that the police should be held to a standard that is higher than just about every other public servant. And one of the things I'd raised with the DPP when he was here was the issue where the DPP office, well, discipline has to be a big thing within the police force. And one of the things that was curious in terms of where the DPP had ruled that an assault had taken place, and again, this is in the public domain. But one of the things I couldn't help but notice is that as I'm looking at the police law, section 90, I think I just want to read the right one. Section 96 of the police law. It basically says a police officer who B, I don't need to read A, but who B, strikes or offers violence to a senior officer, commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to imprisonment for 3 years. Now, I noticed it specifically said a senior officer, but I was curious in terms of what happens when a senior officer does the same thing to a junior officer. What happens in that regard? As in the case with, I think that was in the media with Chief Inspector Frank Owens, I believe, and Cardiff Robinson. Again, this was in the media.
If I can assist, Chairman, so I've come to know about this case since I arrived. I understand it's before the courts at the moment. It is, well, respectfully, Chairman, I understand that there is some judgment that I haven't just seen at the minute, so I can't say for certain. I understand there is a judgment that's imminent. I have not seen it. It was investigated. The matter was submitted to DPP. I don't know much more about it just at the minute. I could submit a written report, but I don't have it at the minute, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. Written report is suffice, Mr. Chairman, because like we said, we're just curious in terms of, because the DPP did say the police should handle it internally, so we're just curious in terms of what was the internal, and that'd be fine. One of the other issues, Mr. Chairman, through you, and this is something that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and myself had raised with the Commissioner, was the issue of overtime. Now, we would pretty much would like an update on that because we have had other instances in other government departments where disciplinary action was taken, but for whatever reason it appears as if though this is something that's been ongoing in the police for quite some time. And again, this is something that's heavily in the public domain. I've had several representations about it, and I'd be curious in terms of where we are in the process and what it is that we intend to do about that.
Mr. Chairman, I just, if I could get some assistance in terms of the aspect that we're dealing with, not sure if it's the non-public duties that are provided for at the likes of the airport, or it's authorised overtime approved by the Commissioner of Police and funded from central government.
Sorry, this relates to officers who basically was claiming overtime and then pretty much while they're still on duty, so in essence they were getting paid twice.
So, as I understand this, Chairman, if I'm correct, and if I'm not, I'd be grateful to be advised. This has to do with the Police Welfare Fund. If I've interpreted correctly, this matter is currently with the Office of the Auditor General, following an initial audit by the Internal Audit Department from Cayman Islands Government, and I'm awaiting that report. It's an extensive audit, and it will take some time before it's completed. I have some information. I think I know what's being said, but it is under investigation at the moment. And if a criminal offence is disclosed, the matter will be investigated, and a file will be submitted to Director of Public Prosecutions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor of, you want? Go ahead. Last
Sorry,
one.
sorry, Mr. Chairman. I keep putting it on, but you're looking ahead. Mr. Chairman, I want to ask the Commissioner a couple of questions. This thing about policemen doing their own work, having their own companies, in my view, presents a unique situation wherein there is conflict. When you're dealing with the public, you can't effectively carry out your job as a police officer. How does this affect your ability to police? Meaning, when people are off vacation, the likes, and how does it affect us having an efficient police force?
I think it's fair to say, Chairman, I have no empirical evidence, or indeed no indicative evidence, that it's interfering with the actual primary task of policing at the moment. Do I have some concerns? Yes, I have some concerns around it, and it's something that will be addressed as we go forward. But at the moment, it is an entitlement for officers to avail, subject to having licensing from DCI and meeting all the requirements, permits in place. It's something that's practiced widely throughout the service, but I have not seen any adverse impact that I can pin just at the moment.
Would it be fair to say that the proposed change in work schedule, the objection thereto surrounded much of this, the ability of many police officers to be off for extended period of time?
It's fair to say, Chairman, that was one of the primary recurring issues in the feedback that I received, but it also, in fairness, impacted on family, and child minding arrangements was another as significant, but it certainly was one of the difficulties raised, that the time off would be less, the rest days, the intervals would be less than they currently are.
Okay. I believe we need to recognize that we have to serve somebody. Mr. Chairman, let me ask the Commissioner, on this subject of road closures, I know the government has now made some determination that they're not going to have two carnivals, and that is on the basis that you can't close down the road twice within short periods of time. Now that is viewed as your inability to accommodate them, and I trust that that is one of the major factors therein. But my concern is, what about the others that we are shutting down roads for? I understand national conference events, but international events, because every nationality that come here, you're accommodating them in closing roads for their day. They can go on some field too. So in the future, will we not see any more of those closures other than for national events?
So, Chairman, I think the best way I can describe this was, I think our approach was not that we couldn't manage it or couldn't handle it. There were two events in quick succession requiring very high levels of policing on the day, and certainly one of our concerns was, why could this event not be one single national event? The differences are between two different parties. One of my senior officers has met with both parties involved, or both entities, tried to explain that, and I understand a decision has been made. And my position at the moment is that I have not provided any road closure order for either event at the moment.
But Commissioner, you see the optics of this, eh? You're not someone who doesn't understand these cultural things, and we all do in here as well. And when you open up, you refuse one, but for whatever reason, whether that's justified or not, it's not my business to justify that. It's the political directorate to deal with that. Whether it's justified or not, when you then provide opportunity for other nationalities to have their Independence Day or their day or whatever that's called, the optics is not very good, and Caymanians who make up both of those entities are going to feel slighted. And so I would hope that the cultural minister, the minister also for health, would do would particularly take a position on whether or not we're going to have cultural events, international cultural events, road closures for, because there are a number of institutions, facilities here that they can be held at. And I think that's where we need to reach.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, member for Bodden Town East.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the member for bringing this up. It's very sad, you know, how this process has it's very sad how this process in terms of the carnivals and road closures has become it's become a national concern from all parties. We've been meeting with these parties for many months, trying to bring resolve to one carnival. The government has went to great lengths to negotiate and to have discussions with both parties so that we could be on the same page. Everyone agrees that it should be one carnival. Regionally, there's no other country that we know that has two carnivals, and Cayman is too small in itself to have two carnivals. And they both agree, but they don't agree on the date. In our summary, we had Bracknell that has been there for some time. You know, and me, I'm just a facilitator. I brought both parties in the room for them to sort it out. We stood back and let them go at it to see if they could come to some reason. It is an unreasonable situation right now that can't be solved by those parties, because no one wants to come off their date. So the government had to make a decision based on information that was provided to us. With our sister island, Cayman Brac, in my opinion, needs every opportunity that it can get to have some kind of commerce and activity in Cayman Brac. And for us to detract from that, this is only my opinion, for us to detract from that would not be the good stewards we are in trying to protect our sister. That's one point with them trying to have the event on the same weekend, the major event as Cayman Bracknell. That's my position on it. And most agreed in the room that they didn't want Cayman Brac's event to be disrupted. Now, I agree with the member from the opposition leader that international events, it is my opinion that road closures, and I've got many representations from persons, even from this year's Pirates Week, who are very upset that they could not access the road. Any national event, in my opinion, should be free on the Cayman roads. And that is my opinion. There should be no international events on our Georgetown downtown road. That is my opinion. And if we have national events, they should be free on our roads in central Georgetown. Now, I've heard representation about they close it for 5Ks and they close it for international events. I just want to make it clear that from what I've seen over the years, 5K events are a partial closure and only coned off portion of the road is only closed off by cones and cars can still pass. So, and that is only probably for about 2, maximum possibly 3 hours. And as they move, as they proceed, they take the cones up and the roads are free. A carnival being closed on the road, on the West Bay Road, is closed for 7, 8, 9 hours. It's much different from a 5K. The international events closure in Georgetown is just also a partial closure, but not one that I support. But it's still not as disruptive as the whole road from Georgetown to West Bay Road. Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, the government stands committed to what we've decided, and the caucus and cabinet approved. The representation was brought to me from both parties that the first weekend in May that we normally had events was clashing with the same type of dollar that we were trying to attract tourists, and that we could not compete with the Bahamas market, and that the Bahamian government had put some 10 million or more into their carnival, and we could not compete with it. So everybody declared that let's move the date, both parties. So this was not just an intention, a decision that we made willy-nilly. It was with a lot of dialogue from both sides. We tried some other events. We even tried June. And I met with the KMAS, and we discussed June. And they wanted to do the long weekend in June. And the challenge with that is that we didn't know whether they were having the parade on the Saturday or on the Monday. And for me to go and ask the governor to close the road on the Queen's birthday is one that I wasn't prepared to do. And they all agreed that we should back off from that. So we tried different things. I went there with an open mind, and I'm saddened that we can't just work together. I even went to them and said, look guys, let's just try this, because we're trying to do something. We're trying to create the National Festivals Office, where Pirates Week, Badabnu, Carnival, everything is going under one element, which is what everyone wanted. So I'm sorry it took so long to explain, but it is a sensitive issue, and I thought I'd better get that out there. But we really tried, and we made a decision. I asked them to give me just 1 year to see how this worked. If it didn't work, we would go back to the drawing board. Okay. But they chose a different option to go in on a national smear, which I'm saddened about.
All those in favor of OCP 1, Crime Prevention and Prevention Services, $22,542,164 in 2020, and $22,789,139 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
Mr. Chairman?
Ayes have it.
I'm sorry. For OCP 2 and OCP 3, you can block vote those two together.
Okay. All those in favor of OCP 2, Crime Investigation and Licensing Services, $12,586,110 in 2020, $12,939,822 in 2021, and OCP 3, Policy Advice, Administrative and Support Services, $7,869,492 in 2020, and $7,833,230 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill. Please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Ayes have it. Can I press you? Do you have other questions on EI 79, you think?
For 5 million, yeah, I think we definitely got questions on that one.
That's fine. And OCP 4. Well, this is a convenient time for us to take the evening break, the dinner break.
Let's finish with the commissioner, if you don't mind.
Okay. For everybody?
You finished with the police?
No. We got this last one, OCP 4.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go ahead and I'm happy to take it, Premier.
Yeah.
The OCP 4, Maritime Security, Search and Rescue, Border Control and Disaster Response Management, $3,702,563 in 2020, $3,712,569 in 2021. Questions? Member for Northside.
Mr. Chairman, the first question I have is how much of this vote and how much of the OCP3 is specifically for the development of the Coast Guard?
Chairman, I think I can assist in saying that the funds currently existing for Joint Marine Unit and the additional funds will be merged to funds for the Coast Guard for operational expenditure. If that's the question, Chairman.
My question this question is directed to the Premier, and to ask the Premier, it was my understanding that when it was first mooted, certainly down here, about the development of a Coast Guard, that it was going to be under bespoke and specific legislation for the Coast Guard, and was not going to remain under the police. Has that policy changed?
Well, quite frankly, national security is one of the special responsibilities of the governor. And so these things have to be negotiated. What we have arrived at is an arrangement where the Coast Guard is separate and distinct operationally, with its own head, but the ultimate authority is the Commissioner of Police.
This respects that's no more than a glorified police marine unit, and that's not what I agreed to support.
No, that would not be correct. It's operationally distinct. The commissioner will not be able. There is a not a term of reference. A memorandum of understanding of how this works, and the Commissioner of Police would not be able to, as has been the case in the past, just arbitrarily say, "Listen, I need 2 of your officers to come and be traffic policemen." The Coast Guard will be a separate and distinct unit, but the line of reporting ultimately is the commander will report to the Commissioner of Police.
The Chief of Police will have control of the budget.
Control of.
Well, but the Coast Guard commander would have to take instructions from the Chief of Police, and the Chief of Police would have to release.
Mr. Chairman, just to assist, so the budget, the Commissioner of Police or the Office of the Commissioner of Police as established will be accountable for the budget. The strategy is drawn by the Commander of the Cayman Islands Coast Guard and approved by me. It's also discussed at the National Security Council, the strategy and direction, but the budget is actually allocated to the Office of Commissioner of Police, and in that regard then the Commissioner is accountable for the budget, Chairman.
Therein lies my control. If we get a Commissioner of Police who is not as supportive of the Coast Guard as you happen to be, then he will have control over the Coast Guard because he'll control the budget. Or are we saying that we're going to make special provisions in the PMFL legislation that the funds that are voted for the Coast Guard, although it goes through the police and the governor, the commander of the Coast Guard has total control over the expenditure of the Coast Guard budget?
Mr. Chairman, the responsibility for the budget lies with the minister who has responsibility for it. That's in terms of this house and this finance committee of the House. That's how it works. Operationally, what we have are 2 distinct units. So the budget will make provision for what funding goes to the Coast Guard based on an agreement about the strategies that are to be employed by that unit. Under the new arrangement, the Commissioner of Police is the chief officer, with responsibility for these services. So he will be in charge of overall of the budget. He reports on budget matters to the minister, who presently is myself. but it could be any other minister. So we do have a number of, plus we also have the National Security Council. So we do have a number of checks and balances in the process where people can say, listen, this is not going as we expected it. The Coast Guard's resources are being depleted or being deployed for use for general policing, and that's not the case. So this is not the ideal arrangement, but we all have to respect the constitutional arrangement, and quite frankly, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office nor the governor was prepared to give outright responsibility for a national security matter to a minister or even a premier. So, you know me, I try to negotiate the best arrangement I can, and I'm not going to sacrifice the good on the altar of perfection. You know, you don't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need. Rolling Stones.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is why I would like to see the money that is in these two votes singled out, and that this Parliament approves that money for the Coast Guard. Then there's no doubt as to what the budget is for the Coast Guard, because that would be in agreement and in concert with the PMFL legislation, and there couldn't be an argument that out of this we are approving $3,702,563 for maritime security, search and rescue, border control, and disaster response management. It could not be argued that only $563 out of it belongs to the Coast Guard. I could argue that the way it's being approved now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is all the Coast Guard. So maybe we can improve the titling of it in that way so that it's clearer. But that's what all this is.
Okay.
OCP4. OCP4, yes.
And what portion of OCP3 is for the Coast Guard? I would like to see that put under this as well, which is for the policy, management, and development, etc.
This is the narrative. The description says provide advice and support is required to the management and staff of the Office of the Commissioner of Police and the Cayman Islands Coast Guard on matters of strategy, asset management, human resources, finance, information technology, and best business practices. So it's wrapped up in this money, which is a significant sum, $7.8 million. Is the administrative and support services and policy advice for the Coast Guard as well as the more general policing.
Certainly the ministry has a breakdown of what portion of that 7.8 million is responsible for the development of strategy, etc. for the Coast Guard.
You have that level of detail? Maybe they do, but we certainly don't have that level of breakdown here.
You see, Mr. Chairman, in the civil service, two things matter: who controls the money and how much staff, how many people you have. And I have great hopes and expectations and for the development of a proper Coast Guard for the Cayman Islands. My concern is that if we don't provide specific budgetary funding, it might work, might not work.
Right. So, Mr. Chairman, I take on board the concerns and advice of the member, and we can look at how we can, going forward, how we can adjust this so that it is clear what aspect of the overall budget for the commissioner is Coast Guard and what aspect is general policing. I understand why that is the case, because experience of the last 30 years has taught us a few things.
Mr. Chair, if I may. I heard the Premier talk about the responsibility of security being the governor's, and that is why it's under the Commissioner of Police. But who said it has to be under Commissioner of Police? Why can't the Coast Guard report direct to the governor too? And that would fulfill Section 55, it is 55, I believe, of the Constitution. Simple. Have we? Maybe the Premier can go and advance that argument, because it would still meet the requirements of his special responsibilities as being responsible for the internal security. Done. It didn't say it could only be the Commissioner of Police reporting to him. No such thing is in the Constitution. National security is the same thing. Report directly to him. So make the Coast Guard report directly to him too, and he has control. Or the FCO.
Mr. Chairman, all I will say to that is that some things are easier said than done.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I understand the Premier. He knows I understand him quite well when he makes certain remarks or comments. I understand when you find yourself with the Napoleon structure, how, just one person needs to be in charge.
Member for Northside.
No, Mr. Chairman, if I could drill down into this vote, OCP4 a little bit. Why are we accepting that if we can get 10% of our Coast Guard staff holding accredited maritime training, that's considered 100% of the objective received? And what kind of accreditation are we looking for?
I didn't hear the question. Let me ask the commander.
Robert Scotland, Commander. Robert Scotland, Commander of the Coast Guard. Mr. Speaker, through you. That number, sir, is given based on the total number of Joint Marine Unit staff.
But why are we being satisfied that only 10% of them needs to be certified? I would think that all your Marine all of your staff would have some kind of boating certification, not just your engineers, captains, but ABs and stuff, and some kind of certification into the rules of the road and the operation of maritime vessels?
No, sir. I think that number was actually 100% guaranteed based on the total staff complement at the moment.
Narrative says quality, increased percentage of staff holding accredited maritime training by 10% in one or more of the following categories: engineering, boat handling, and captaincy.
Yes, sir. That number is actually allocated. All of the staff presently there have a certain degree of training. This is pretty much wrapping up the outstanding training needs and development needs that have been identified.
And one of those training is you can swim, right?
Yes, sir. That's a mandatory requirement for being in the unit.
What certification in boat handling are you looking to? Is it U.S. Coast Guard 100-ton, 6-pack? Or are we going to create something locally?
Mr. Speaker, through you, we're looking at using the Royal Yachting Association as the basic minimum standard for small vessel operator course.
And those courses are available online, and or are you going to send people over there for training?
No, we will conduct training locally, sir.
And how do you, the description in the top line is one of my pet subjects. In fact, the government accepted a motion over a year ago about requiring pleasure boat owners, private boat owners who have a vessel, I think it was more than 25 feet and more than 50 horsepower, to have some kind of safety regulations, training prior to taking the ownership of the boat. And one of your descriptions is to ensure compliance of commercial and domestic vessels' safety standards.
Mr. Speaker, through you. Yes, sir. Part of the initiative within the Coast Guard is to actually introduce and pass legislation relative to both small craft, private and commercial vessels. Once that legislation is passed, we would commence active enforcement of them.
You are aware that the Port Authority legislation currently carries within it certain safety requirements for boating in Cayman?
Mr. Speaker, through you, yes, sir, we're well aware of that, sir. Unfortunately, the Port Authority law does not have any penalties or sanctions attached to it. Hence, one of the problems that we have.
Well, just to point out to you how urgently I believe it is, I departed Cayman Bay at 6:30 last night, and between the outside marker for the channel into Cayman Bay and the outside marker for the channel into the cove at Rum Point, I think I crossed 6 boats, and I think it was only one that had on navigation lights. And in 2 occasions, although I had the right of way because I was on the starboard side of the other boat, which our regulations say that has a right of way, I had to stop or slow down and go around the stern of the boat that was going to collide with me. So there is some urgency in getting these regulations in place and some kind of mechanism to enforce them.
Mr. Speaker, through you. Yes, sir, we fully agree. We're working with the legal drafting committee, legal drafting department, as well as the Maritime Authority to introduce that regulations.
And are you going to also, or do you currently have responsibility for other in-water activities like the situation at Rum Point on every Sunday afternoon where people are, to say they're behaving badly is putting it rather mildly, and the absence of police presence and people getting prosecuted is glaring. I mean, it's something needs to be done.
Mr. Speaker, through you. Yes, sir, we are aware of that. It is part of our tasking and remit, which we will commence enforcement of. We will deliver the best possible service we can based on the resources and funding that we have, sir.
I believe, I know it used to be, I'm not certain what the new liquor license requirements are, but as I recall, those party boats, I call them for want of another better term, that come up from the West Bay Peninsula on a Sunday afternoon. I thought that their liquor license restricted them to dispensing liquor and playing music beyond a quarter mile from shore. Is that still in place?
Mr. Speaker, through you. Yes, sir, that legislation is still in place, but is it being fully enforced as stringently as it could? No, sir.
Because my next question would be is that you know that they come up to Rum Point and they're certainly within a quarter mile, and in addition to the people who go there with families, you can't take your family to Rum Point on a Sunday evening anymore. I mean, 2 Sunday evenings ago, I was anchored there with my family, and a boat came up and anchored in front of me, and all 3 people took out marijuana spliffs. I had to tell my wife, I got to leave because I will test positive for ganja tomorrow, right? And nothing seems to happen. All of the people who own the houses at shore on shore, right, are complaining about the volume of music. I mean, last night, when I was docking my boat at Sandpoint, which I was probably more than a quarter mile away, the music, right, was still unbearable even at that distance away. And we really need to do something as a matter of urgency to try and sort out that problem. And quite frankly, the Stingray City is much better, because I left there and took my family to Stingray City, and I wasn't there half hour when one of them blue Jamaica Dory come up, and they had about 6 people in it, and they all took out there. Some of them spliffs that they lit were bigger than my cigars, and nobody seems to be enforcing this stuff.
You okay? Yeah. Member for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, is it the intention of the Coast Guard to patrol Stingray City and Sandbar because it needs enforcement? And it would be an ideal situation if the Coast Guard was in a position to offer that service and to offer support and let us get that asset under control.
Mr. Speaker, through you. Yes, sir. Part of the remit and the tasking of the Cayman Islands Coast Guard will be to ensure maritime safety, which covers patrols of the recreational areas, also called wildlife interaction zones, as well as other prominent recreational water recreational areas that we have. This patrol will be done in compliance with the resources that or in conjunction with the resources that we have. Will we be able to provide a 24/7 presence there? Unfortunately not, but we have committed to providing what presence we can, where we can.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, will your new commercial and domestic safety vessel standards make it illegal and punitive to operate a boat under the influence of alcohol?
Through you, Mr. Speaker, yes, sir, that is very important. It's one of the first things that was actually identified.
Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, to the, I guess, back to the commissioner, I guess. In his earlier statement, he was saying that there were 36 members of the Joint Marine Unit. Just out of curiosity, how many of those of the 36 are actually would be in the Coast Guard?
Mr. Chairman, the correct number for the Joint Marine Unit is 14 at the moment, and depending on the selection criteria, those persons will transition in. There will be between 9 and 12 new officers recruited for 2020 to increase the number to 21 in the Coast Guard, as with the operating budget that's been allocated.
Sorry, I was going back to your earlier statement when you said there were 486 officers, 50 were admin, and 36 was Joint Marine Unit.
436 were in my frontline services division, including all my support services.
Okay.
I'd respectfully submit that I don't think the figure of 36 for the Marine Unit.
Okay, sorry, so it was 54 was admin, so I just want the
50 for admin.
50 for admin.
So 436 frontline officers, Mr. Chairman. When I say frontline officers, I include my air support unit, my scenes of crime, my analysts. I include them as part of the operational force rather than administrative.
Okay, so 436 was operational and 50 was admin.
Yes, Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, and so the Joint Marine Unit would be in the 436?
Yes, Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, and I'm just trying to get, just in terms of the Coast Guard, what is the head count are we looking, that will be in, that the Coast Guard is looking to hire or will be transferred to the Coast Guard unit?
If I could explain that to Chairman, the total number of Coast Guard during 2020 will be 21 officers. Okay. It's likely it will subsume some, but not all, of the existing Joint Marine Unit officers.
So the plan is to recruit between 9 and somewhere between 13 and 14 people during 2020 with maritime skills and primarily Caymanian nationals to the Cayman Islands Coast Guard.
Is there something you wanted to say? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Like the member for Northside, I was concerned just to make sure that the funds allocated goes towards the Coast Guard. I'm very happy that we do actually have a commissioner in place that is supportive of the Coast Guard. We know that was one of the issues where the last commissioner wasn't too keen on, so we're happy with that in that regard. So one step at a time, I guess.
All those in favor of OCP 4, Maritime Security, Search and Rescue, Border Control and Disaster Response Management.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I think the Commissioner needs to clarify one point.
Okay.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I was asked a question earlier by the Honourable member of the House. He asked me about acting positions. Sorry, just before you close off. And just to get it absolutely correct, it was 1 acting superintendent, 3 acting chief inspectors, 6 acting inspectors, and 16 acting police sergeants. I think that's the incorrect number. I'm not sure if I gave 11, but the number is actually 16, and I just want to have it corrected before we sign off, Chairman.
So all those in favor of OCP 4, Maritime Security, Search and Rescue, Border Control and Disaster Response Management, $3,702,563 in 2020.
Mr. Chairman, just before you vote, we're voting for this money with the understanding that the funds that are actually for the Coast Guard are going to be separated out and accounted for separately.
I think they said it would dealt with prospectively, yes.
Yeah, but I just want to be clear that the funds that are contained in here that is specific to the Coast Guard are going to be, are you going to change the narrative to make sure that the funds that are in here, what we are voting for, those funds are for the Coast Guard, and it would be ultra-virus with the PMFL law to use them for anything else?
No.
Mr. Chairman, we would have to move the motion now to adjust the heading. I think for us, all we need to do for OCP 4. For OCP 3, that's more difficult because the policy advice, administrative and support services for both the general police and the Coast Guard are wrapped up in one vote. So that's more difficult to unravel. But this one, we can adjust the language here, I think, to say something like Mr. Chairman, I think we just need to include the words Coast Guard and then leave the rest of it. Yes, in front. Right. Right. Coast Guard dash. Yeah. I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so the proposal before the committee at this time is to change the narrative for OCP 4
The heading,
to
sir.
the heading to be Coast Guard - Maritime Security, Search and Rescue, Border Control and Disaster Response Management. All those in favor of the amendment to the narrative and forming part of the appropriation, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Ayes have it. Those now in favor of OCP 4 as amended to Coast Guard - Maritime Security, Search and Rescue, Border Control and Disaster Response Management in the amount of $3,702,563 in 2020 and $12,569 in 2021, forming part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Ayes have it. Finally, we come down to EI 79, Office of the Police Commissioner, $1,075,000 in 2020, $4,380,000 in 2021. Are there questions? Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Honorable Premier. Can we get a breakdown specifically of what those assets will be purchasing over the next 2 years? The specific number?
It's found on page 269 of the plan and estimates.
I'm not talking that, I'm talking within the budget statements, because there's normally another listing again.
Mr. Chairman, it's page 227.
Sorry, yeah. Indoor firearms range 200,000. Is that going to be a separate building being built, or that's going to be someplace else?
Mr. Chairman, to assist with that, we don't have any structured firearms training facilities at the moment. Our officers are training in 80-degree heat. We use the firing range shared with the gun club when we can. There is a mobile firing range we could purchase from the United States. We are looking at it in the context of the West Bay project, and we would hope to make some advancement next year on that to provide an indoor training firearms range, 5 or 10 lane. And that certainly is a start in terms of us funding what would be a proper and functional training facility for our firearms officers, for long arm and short arm.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the vehicles, is this a situation, I notice we're spending $600,000 over the next 2 years. Is this a situation where we're retiring some vehicles and replacing them with new vehicles, or this would be in addition to what we have now?
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, most certainly retiring vehicles. We have an exceptional fleet at the moment as a police service. We have some excellent vehicles. I do have to buy some more firearms response vehicles which are purpose-built. I do have to buy a prisoner van and a small amount of patrol vehicles within the next 2 years within the funds allocated, but that will result in the retirement of older vehicles beyond the economic their life cycle, beyond the economic life cycle.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. That concludes my questions to the Commissioner. Just want to tell him thank you on behalf of the people of Bodden Town West. The Community Service Group is actually doing a pretty good job, and I just want to say thanks, and anything that we can do to help, be happy.
Yes, sir.
Member for East End.
Mr. Chairman, I just want, my interest is around those boats and equipment. For the 4 million, the 485,000, 2020, and the 4 million for 21.
With your permission, Chairman, I can provide some breakdown. We have 5 vessels at the moment. The Guardian, 65 foot. It's 10 years old, about 2 to 3 years left on it. The Defender, 38 foot, mid-range, about 2 years left. Niven D, recently returned to the United States, full midlife refit, ready for life expectancy another 10 years. We are immediately sending boat number 4, which is Mark Luke, an intercept rib, to United States for fit out. That's early 2020, take about 6 months to fit out. And we come to our 5th vessel, Typhoon, which is beyond economic repair, will have to be replaced. And in fact, the strategic plan and discussion with Commander of the Cayman Islands Coast Guard is to seek to purchase from the capital funding provided two of these small rib, shallow water inshore patrol vessels, one for Cayman Brac specific and one for inland patrolling here. With the replacement will be two 20-foot closed cabin that can deal with 8-foot seas, and that's what we're looking at the minute. It will take between 18 months and 2 years to procure and secure those two vessels. The next vessel we're targeting for replacement is the 12-year-old Defender, 38-foot mid-range inshore vessel. Cost around that is around 1.8 million at the moment. And after that, the strategic plan is to replace the Guardian into 2022, 2023 with a deposit paid from the capital funding in 2022, which accounts for all of the capital funding. So what I'm trying to convey is that there is a strategic plan in place to get a fit-for-purpose Cayman Islands Coast Guard fleet, and the funding provided certainly gives us the opportunity to make significant advancement over the next 2 years, with some residual advancement required in the next budget cycle, 22-23.
So is it the strategic plan to sell the Defender?
When we get there, we'll have to see. As I said, there's about 3 years left. There was a lot of money spent on it last year, totally unfit for purpose for us, for lots of reasons. And when we get to that stage, we can look and see what its residual or its scrap for sale value might be on that.
Have we done a professional survey on that boat?
There was a survey done in 2017 before repairs, and I think before we move to hopefully the purchase in 2020, there will be another marine survey done on that. Just advised here, Mr. Chairman, by the Commander, that we are working with the Cadet Corps, and that we will look at seeing is there any use for the Defender or the Guardian by the Cadet Corps.
Mr. Chairman, that's where I was going. If we're not going to replace that, how will we accommodate going between here and Cayman Brac and interceptions, because we can't do those with ribs?
Yeah, there is a requirement to have a small boat capability in Cayman Brac. That has been discussed. It's a priority. It's something we are hugely cognizant of. The best advice is that the 25-foot closed cabin type vessel, Mr. Chairman, is the best vessel for Cayman Brac, and will also, if we can double up within the funding that's provided, to have one here in Grand Cayman, so we don't have to keep transporting back and forward.
Oh, you mean to be stationary in Cayman Brac? No, I am talking about intercepting vessels between here and Cayman Brac and Jamaica. That was the intent of the 28 when we the 38 when we had the 75 or whatever she is, the what's her Defender or whatever she is. That was the intent of that boat. So I'm wondering if we're going to replace that to be able to do that.
Chairman, yes, the answer is yes, with the funding that's provided, as I said, to replace Typhoon. It's beyond its economic lifetime. Two vessels similar in 28-foot, and the next boat that's for replacement is the Defender, 12-year-old Defender, which we believe only has a 2-year life expectancy in it. That's for a similar boat, mid-range, inshore, 38-foot or similar. The Commander can provide more technical detail if that's required, but within the funding, the boats we're looking at are around 1.8 million or so at the moment. There is a lead-in time from order to delivery of somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, Mr. Chairman, for any new boat.
So you're saying that larger boat will be replaced, is going to be ordered now, so that at its end, its life end, which is 18 months, 2 years down the road, there will be a delivery of a similar size boat.
sorry, to make it clear, so the Guardian is the largest vessel, which would be the most expensive, and to replace the Guardian, which is a 65-foot boat, long range, somewhere in the region of $5 million. Our plan is to replace Typhoon with two 25-foot close cabin boats, and to replace the Defender within the current budget allocation. The remaining funds will be used then to place a deposit on a replacement for the Guardian, which will bring us into the next budget cycle. So it's growth, I think it's incremental development.
Okay, now I'm getting it. I wasn't getting it a while ago. But I know that the big one is the one that is for the high seas. And you're saying that has about 2 or 3 years left on it.
Yeah, there was a lot of money spent on it over the last 2 years, and the estimation now from the commander and his team, the lieutenant commander who looks after the fleet, is a 2 to 3 year life expectancy, Chairman.
Wow. I am Commissioner, you will understand my concern when we're dealing with rescue and the likes. You're not going to do that in those 25-foot enclosed boats, especially if we're, and I know the commander knows this, that we are a type of people who are sea adventurous, so to speak. And those boats are not going to cut it. We need, and I know that Guardian is not doing anything anytime soon, because every time she's in the North Sound and we try to go out with the northeast winds, which is why we would need to use her. We usually tear the props off or something. So the need to have that boat available for the use for the Coast Guard, if you're going to call it Coast Guard, is very important. And to put it that far down is not conducive with the development of a robust Coast Guard system.
With your permission, Chairman and Premier, we do have the commander who can provide some more technical detail, if that was acceptable.
That would be nice.
Mr. Speaker, through you. Sir, in relation to your question, the replacement for Guardian, because of the lead time that it takes for us to order a fit-for-purpose vessel, which is what I think everybody agrees that we need, the lead time on that, from time the order is placed and the down payment's made until the vessel is delivered, it will be around 18 months. In the short term, the vessel that we're hoping to replace Defender with, which is our inshore patrol vessel, we've taken a lot of research, consultation around it, and we're looking at a vessel that's capable of handling 15-foot seas with a shallow draft of less than 3 feet because of the North Sound. The U.S. Coast Guard has provided a lot of advice and assistance to us in that regard, as well as some other Coast Guards. She is, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And what's her length?
She is 44 feet, sir.
Oh, 44?
Yes, sir.
And I've been here, 25?
No, through you, Mr. Speaker. The Typhoon, which is our rib, which has reached her operational life, she needs to be replaced. And the type of work that she does, which is close to shore, we need a vessel that will replace her and adequately perform her tasks. Similar to the BRAC, we need a small vessel that can be used over there between the sister islands. Hence why we're looking at 225-foot, between 24 and 27 foot, ideally 25, enclosed cabin. Again, capable of handling the weather there, but also addressing the shallow draft.
Mr. Chairman, I wish Mr. Scotland all the luck in the world. I really do. But my advice to him is that we have a problem in this country when it comes to the operation of mechanical things, and that is that we believe we should run them until they stop. Thus, the reason why the rib is now run until it's stopping. Meaning we need to maintain the equipment. If we do not maintain it on a weekly basis, on a per shift base, then it is all for naught. We bought that equipment, brand new, all of it, and here we are 10 years later and it's of no use. Most people keep their boats for 20 odd years. I got one that was 92. Perfect shape. But that is what we do. And that is going to be your singularly your greatest job that you're going to have. You can't have a Coast Guard without the equipment. And you can't have the equipment without maintenance.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
To the Director of the Coast Guard. I understand that you're replacing some of the engines on some of the rib boats, and the contemplation is that they're putting on basically the new Mercury race engines as opposed to more utility engines with the same horsepower?
Mr. Speaker, through you, yes, the engines that have been replaced on Niven D, which was just refitted, we've reduced the total engine number by 1. They now have 3. Increase in horsepower, less weight, better fuel efficiency. Mr. Speaker, through you, no, sir, they're not full race. Mr. Speaker, through you, follow up to that. One of the decisions made is to actually standardize all of the engines within our fleet. As you can appreciate, it makes sense.
Member for Georgetown Central, then I'm going to take the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any question, but simply a comment. I just want to take this opportunity to congratulate Mr. Scotland to be in the post that he's in as a proponent for trying everything I can to ensure that Caymanians are at the top post in this country. I feel honored to see you where you are, and I wish you the best of success in your post. And I want to give credit to the government for I'm not sure if they're for whatever involvement they had with his appointment, if they have had any, to give credit where credit is due. It's a pleasure to see you in that post, and I wish you all the best of success, and I know you will give it your best to prove that Caymanians can hold top posts in this country. So thank you.
All those in favor of EI 79, Office of the Police Commissioner, $1,075,000 in 2020 and $4,380,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. We are going to take the dinner break. It is 7:25. Let's be back at 8 o'clock, please. And we're going to pick up with the Ministry of International Trade, Investment, Aviation, and Maritime Affairs.
Mr. Chair, can you indicate all of what you intend to address tonight?
I'm being corrected here. The next one is going to be the Minister for Employment and Border Control, ABC.
Mr. Chair, can you indicate if that's the only one we're going to be doing for the rest of the night?
This will be it, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. So we'll break until 8 o'clock.